how do you know when you're out of your head and connected to a person, and what do you do to get out of your head if you're disconnected?
Oh, that's a big question. So I think everybody has to know there's a little bit of self realization that has to go into knowing what it's like when you're in your head. There's some telltale signs, right? You know you're in your head when you're not aware of your immediate surroundings, right? When your five senses disengage, when you're not hearing the sounds around you, when you're not seeing the brightness of the colors, when you're not smelling the smoke or smelling the perfume, when your five senses fail you, you know you're really deep in your head. And that's a dangerous place to be in the field for us for lots of reasons. It's not a helpful place for you to be if you're trying to talk to a female and connect to her in the moment. But yeah, look for those five senses to fail you. And then you get out of there by focusing on those five senses. It's something that we often do in wartime, in the battlefield scenario. When you're getting shot at, believe it or not, when you're getting shot at, you go to your head. You don't go to your gut. You go to your head and you start thinking, if I put my head out there, I'm going to get shot. If I put my head out there, I might get shot. If I call on this radio thing, I might have 5 seconds before I make the right call. How fast are they moving? How slow are they moving? Based on the number of rounds I'm hearing, how many shooters are there? You're in your head. And a lot of times what you have to do is we force ourselves to stop and just touch the dirt, touch the ground, and just smell the air, feel the heat on your skin, listen to the noise, and all of a sudden everything just becomes clear. The moment becomes clear because you're focusing on those five senses. I would imagine that if you're sitting with a female, it's going to work the same as if you're under a firefight. I've been fortunate that enough firefights make it so sitting in front of a female doesn't really put you in your head anymore.
Yeah, I think there are some guys that go into their body more when they're under pressure around women, and but most guys go into their head or go nervous. Some guys see a woman and they just drop in. It's like animal instinct kicks on, and it's pretty amazing. And I was going to ask you that in a firefight, are there some guys, a very small percentage of guys, that actually get more present in a firefight? Maybe it's 5%, 2%, 1%.
Yeah, there are, for sure. There are those guys, and it's a beautiful thing to see, but it's also a terrifying thing to see. People who almost recklessly seem to not appreciate life because they're so focused on preserving life. It's a powerful thing to see. And a lot of times it doesn't make them a better shooter. It doesn't make them faster on their feet. It doesn't make them a better leader. But it's the kind of person that acts like an animal that's been cornered, right? Like that's the scariest moment when you are in a position where you have to fight for your life. That's where you really realize, am I like a badger or am I like a llama? How am I going to respond? Like, how am I going to react in that moment? Am I going to cower in the corner until life is taken from me? Or am I going to fight tooth and nail, bite, scratch, and whatever else until I either win or I go down fighting? And when you see those people in action, you never look at them the same after the firefight's over.
Interesting. Are there, let's go one step further. Is there any group that actually gets super meditative? Like so focused, they're just in the zone, flow state?
Oh. So I'm talking about flow state being in those folks, right? They become so connected to their carnal nature, their carnal defense, that they're just flowing. It's almost, I mean, I don't like using this comparison necessarily, but have you seen those movies, like any of the Sherlock Holmes movies or some of those action movies where they'll put a fight in that flow motion, like slow motion, where you just see the person, every move they make is right, everything they do is right. It's never that perfect, but it's a little bit like that. It's a little bit like, how did that dude just cover 50 feet of ground and take out 5 bad guys? And we're all still back here, dialing in air support. How did that happen? And who the hell's backing that guy up? Because he's out there by himself right now, right? So it does get to be that kind of flow. In their minds, they might be meditative, but they're also the ones that go back to camp afterwards with no aftershock, right? They're the guys that go back and have a beer and then they're telling jokes about how they almost shit their pants.
And they're special. They're typically the special forces guys, right? I would imagine they become special forces. Yeah,
a lot of those guys are guys that have tested themselves in some kind of tier 1 special operating capacity. But every now and then you'll find there's a great story. So I did a podcast series with a deep cover officer who spent a lot of time embedded with tier 1 operators. If you look up the Everyday Espionage podcast, that's my podcast. And if you look up episodes where they're titled ED Jackal, Everyday ED Jackal, Jackal was this awesome guy, and he tells this great story about a medic who was one of these flow state operators, but he was just a medic. And then one day there was a firefight, and this medic just tapped into his flow state, and he did things that nobody even thought was possible. And his nickname from that day forward became God, because either he was a god or God had a special place for him in heaven to make it so that this guy just was untouchable.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was wondering about. Because did you ever see the movie Black Hawk Down?
I have, and I read the book too.
Yeah, loosely based on a true story, right?
Yep.
And you could see the difference between those green Rangers and the Delta Force guys. And they really illustrated that extreme difference, how calm the Delta Force guys stayed under pressure, even in the face of certain death.
Yeah.
I always remember the ending scene when that Delta Force guy got all those Rangers out of the combat zone or whatever. I'm not sure the exact term, but got him out of that zone. And then he was like a bagel, grabbed a coffee, and just walked right back in.
Delta guys, yeah. And Delta guys are like that. Delta guys are the most unassuming people in the world, man. They are, you would never know that you're standing next to one until you saw them in action. And then afterwards, you would doubt that you actually saw them do what you just thought you saw them do, because they pick up a Playboy and they kick up their shoes and they drink their coffee.
Yeah. That's a certain mentality, I'm sure. And
yeah.
A rare breed, but that's what I was curious about. Cool.
I love cool moments, man.
I've seen guys like that they can't even teach. I've seen guys like that with women, and it's not as dangerous, but I've seen guys where they're not very assuming, but they get around women like in a bar or a really high pressure situation, and suddenly this charisma and this personality comes out that's so spontaneous and so on point and so in flow. They're no longer thinking, and they're just doing.
Yeah.
They tend to be amazing. They tend to be terrible teachers.
Because they can't put words to what they're feeling. Yeah.
No, it's all coming through them. There's a guy I used to know. His name was, they called him Savage, and his name was Jason. And he was my height, my look. He was he could have been my brother. And I would go out with him, and during the day, he was like, yeah, my life sucks. He lived in a van. He had no real life. My life sucks. I can't believe it. I haven't done this. And there was this mumbly kind of, and I'm like, this guy, the first time I met him, I'm thinking, this guy's good with women. Back to this guy. And then we go out to a bar that night, and he walks in the bar and he starts doing this weird rocking thing, just gently rocking back and forth. And I'm watching, what's he doing? And you just see this energy starting to come through his body, and this light, his eyes light up, his face lights up. And he suddenly looks around, and a whole new personality, like he was possessed, comes out of him. And he grabs the first girl, yanks her over, starts flirting with her. And this is when I was learning. I was just watching him. He's like, Brian, grab me that girl. And he's talking to this girl. And as I pull this girl over, he turns to her, starts talking to her. And he's just going like a machine, like a bat out of hell. And he's not thinking about shit. And next thing you know, he's got 6 girls hanging around him. He's flirting up a storm. Everything he does seems to work. And there's like magic flowing out of him. So this is the kind of guy in a dating situation. Mm-hmm. And all guys that have done a lot of bar game have hit those flow states where they feel like they can do no wrong. This guy could just hit it so consistently. It was like a part of him.
Wow.
But he was depressed.
Yeah.
Normally miserable. And
he was ruled by his emotions, man. Yeah. It was the same feelings that made him strong in the bar scene tore him down when he was on his own. Yeah.
Yeah, he would have highs and then crashes. So
if you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip, or here to see the full podcast episode.
Freedom! So fresh, so new. Freedom!